Nora Hale spent her nights repairing wedding dresses she could never afford. Inside a narrow bridal alteration shop in Baltimore, she stitched pearls onto silk gowns for women who complained about delayed fittings while her own family faced eviction. Every finished dress represented someone else's future. For Nora, it only meant another week of rent, another overdue bill, and another reminder that poverty could make a person feel invisible. Since their father's sudden death, Nora and her identical twin sister Sienna had survived by depending entirely on each other. Their mother had died years earlier, leaving Nora cautious and responsible while Sienna became restless, determined to escape a life shaped by debt. Their struggle changed the night a black luxury vehicle stopped outside the Hale apartment. Two representatives from the Voss organization entered carrying legal documents connected to Owen Hale's former shipping company. The papers revealed that their father had owed millions of dollars through hidden financial accounts and private transportation deals. The debt came with one condition. It would be erased only if Sienna married Dominic Voss. Owen had named Sienna in the agreement, and the marriage would transfer the remaining Hale shipping shares into Dominic's control. Refusing meant losing the apartment, inheriting the criminal debt, and facing consequences neither sister could afford. Sienna immediately searched Dominic's history. She found reports about his former fiancée, who had died in a suspicious car accident days before their wedding. Another woman connected to him had disappeared after accepting a private engagement. To Sienna, the pattern was clear. The marriage was not an arrangement. It was a death sentence. The cruelty of the contract affected Nora more deeply than the money. Powerful men had reduced one poor woman's life to a signature, a debt payment, and a transfer of property. Before dawn, Nora entered their father's abandoned storage unit, hoping to find records that could cancel the agreement. Dust covered old shipping files, damaged ledgers, and locked metal boxes. Inside one box, she discovered photographs of Owen meeting Dominic Voss and Caleb Rourke, Dominic's most trusted advisor. One photograph carried a handwritten warning on the back. The marriage must never be completed. Nora barely had time to hide it before vehicles arrived outside. Caleb's
Nora,
men had come to take Sienna to the Voss estate.
I have to, Sienna.
With no legal
they will
protection,
kill you if they
no
find
money,
out.
and no time
Just
left.
Go!
Nora realized the twins still possessed one advantage no contract could control. They were identical. Inside the storage unit, Nora changed clothes with Sienna, took her identification, and arranged for her sister to escape through the rear exit. Then Nora walked toward the waiting vehicle. She believed she only needed to maintain the deception long enough for Sienna to leave Baltimore and disappear. As the car carried her away, Nora opened a file left beside the seat. Inside was a photograph of Sienna stamped with one chilling instruction: eliminate her after the wedding. The photograph marked for Sienna's elimination remained hidden inside Nora's coat as the black vehicle carried her toward Dominic Voss's coastal estate. By the time the gates opened, Baltimore felt impossibly far away. The mansion rose above the ocean behind stone walls, armed guards, biometric doors, and cameras positioned at every entrance. It looked less like a home than a fortress built to contain secrets. Caleb Rourke welcomed Nora at the main entrance. His manner appeared controlled and respectful, but his eyes studied every movement she made. Nora forced herself to imitate Sienna's confidence, knowing that one wrong habit could expose the switch. Dominic did not appear immediately. Household employees guided Nora through the estate with a mixture of fear and pity. Some avoided looking directly at her. Others watched as though she had already become part of a tragedy they understood but could not prevent. Nora soon learned why. The wedding was scheduled in 5 days at a private chapel built into the cliffs beyond the mansion. Every arrangement had already been made without the bride's approval. Inside a luxury fitting suite, a stylist dressed Nora in an expensive white gown selected months earlier. The fabric was flawless, but the experience felt less like preparation for marriage and more like being measured for an execution. Dominic finally entered during the final fitting. He was younger than Nora expected, broad-shouldered and sharply controlled, with the presence of a man accustomed to being obeyed before he spoke. His attention moved over her with unsettling precision. Nora avoided personal details and copied the posture she had seen Sienna use around strangers. It was not enough. Dominic noticed that she reached for a glass with her left hand. The woman he had previously met had used her right. He also watched her fail to recognize a diamond necklace Sienna had selected during an earlier meeting. Yet he said nothing. His silence frightened Nora more than immediate exposure. If Dominic already knew the truth, then he might be waiting for the right moment to use it against her. Later, Nora slipped away into the mansion's private greenhouse. Among rare flowers and polished glass, she found a memorial photograph of Dominic's former fiancé. The engraved date beneath it matched the day the woman had been scheduled to sign a major financial transfer. Near a locked gardening cabinet, Nora discovered a torn piece of wedding fabric stained with dried blood. 2 embroidered initials matched the dead fiancé's name. Before she could hide the evidence, Caleb appeared at the greenhouse entrance. He did not accuse her of searching. He did not need to. His presence made one thing clear. Every hallway, room, and movement inside the estate was being watched. From a nearby balcony, Gideon Shaw noticed that Nora's fear intensified only when Caleb was present. That evening, Nora received a hidden message supposedly sent by Sienna. It claimed her twin had escaped Baltimore safely and was already crossing state lines. Relief weakened Nora's caution. She believed the sacrifice had worked. What she did not know was that Caleb's men had intercepted Sienna before she reached the highway. Deep beneath the mansion, inside a locked security room, Sienna watched Nora through a surveillance screen while Caleb prepared to turn one twin into a weapon against the other. The false message from Sienna gave Nora only a few hours of peace. The next morning, Dominic Voss took her away from the mansion under the pretense of reviewing wedding security at the private marina. Caleb remained behind, which made the journey feel less guarded but no less dangerous. Dominic watched everything. He noticed how Nora signed a visitor form, how she reacted to unfamiliar names, and how carefully she avoided questions about previous meetings. His silence made it clear that he was not simply accompanying her. He was studying her. At the marina, Dominic informed her that a medical examination was required before the marriage license could be finalized. Panic tightened inside Nora. Sienna's records would not match her body. Nora had suffered a wrist fracture as a teenager, while her twin had never broken a bone. Even a basic scan could expose everything. During the drive to the clinic, Nora pretended to feel sick, hoping to delay the appointment. Before she could create another excuse, gunfire struck the vehicle. A second car forced them toward the edge of the coastal highway. The attackers ignored Dominic's side and concentrated their fire on Nora. Dominic pulled her down and shielded her while Gideon drove through the barrier of vehicles. One attacker was dragged from a damaged car before the others escaped. Inside his jacket, Gideon found a photograph of Nora. The label beneath it identified her as the substitute twin. Dominic no longer pretended ignorance. He had known from the moment she entered the mansion. Nora's posture, handwriting, dominant hand, and unfamiliarity with Sienna's necklace had exposed the switch. He had remained silent because the marriage arrangement itself seemed designed by someone inside his organization. Dominic also denied ordering the deaths of his former fiancée and the missing accountant. Both women had uncovered suspicious financial transfers shortly before they were attacked. Nora wanted to believe him, but every answer still came from a Mafia don surrounded by secrets. At the hidden clinic, a scan confirmed the old fracture in Nora's wrist. Dominic ordered Gideon to alter the file before Caleb could access it. That decision changed the balance between them. Dominic was no longer exposing her deception. He was protecting it. The clinic's records also revealed a hidden condition inside the marriage contract. Once the bride signed the final document, control of the Hale shipping company would pass through offshore accounts before disappearing under Dominic's name. Someone intended to steal the company and leave Dominic responsible. Nora reviewed Sienna's message again. A childhood phrase they had used for years contained one wrong word. Her sister had not written it. The realization struck with brutal force. Nora had taken Sienna's place to save her, but the switch may have led Caleb directly to her. Dominic agreed to help locate Sienna, but the wedding could not be cancelled. Ending it now would warn the traitor that the deception had failed. Nora would remain the false bride while Dominic hunted for her twin. Minutes later, Gideon traced the fake message to a sealed room beneath Dominic's own mansion. The sealed room beneath the mansion led Dominic, Nora, and Gideon toward an older network of tunnels running under the cliffside wedding chapel. The chapel had belonged to the Voss family for generations. Its white stone walls overlooked the ocean, while narrow service passages and forgotten crypts disappeared beneath the foundation. Gideon checked the access records and found that Caleb had entered those tunnels repeatedly after Dominic's former fiancée died. Inside the underground crypt, Nora discovered deep scratches around a locked iron door. Someone had tried to escape from the other side. Behind it, they found a hidden compartment containing a torn veil, a blood-stained bracelet, and a damaged phone belonging to Dominic's former bride. The phone still held fragments of a recorded video. One section showed Caleb meeting Owen Hale inside a shipping warehouse. Owen appeared frightened as Caleb placed the marriage contract before him. The footage proved Nora's father had not freely offered Sienna to Dominic. Caleb had forced him to sign after discovering that Owen copied evidence of illegal financial transfers, hidden inside the Voss shipping network. Owen tried to protect his daughters by concealing the missing records inside the Hale Company's security system. Dominic's former fiancée later discovered Caleb's scheme. She planned to expose him during their wedding, before the final financial transfer could be completed. She never reached the ceremony. Caleb arranged the car crash that killed her. The second missing woman had been an accountant who helped decode Owen's records. She disappeared after learning the same truth. Caleb's loyalty to Dominic had been nothing more than camouflage. For years, it had given him access to every account, route, and trusted name inside the organization. Nora finally understood the purpose of the marriage. Once the bride signed the final document, the ceremony would unlock the hidden Hale account. The bride would then be killed, leaving Dominic blamed for another dead fiancé. Yet the people Caleb had considered powerless had carried every piece of evidence capable of destroying him. Inside the bracelet case, Nora found a coded note written by her father. It explained that neither twin could unlock the hidden account alone. The system required biometric confirmation from both sisters. That was why Caleb had taken Sienna alive. He needed Nora until the wedding and Sienna until the transfer. Dominic decided to continue the ceremony and expose Caleb before the criminal families supporting him. Nora could not tell whether he was protecting her or using her as bait. Still, his willingness to risk his empire for both sisters began changing how she saw him. At a seaside cemetery, Gideon arranged to leave the recovered evidence for a trusted federal contact. Before it could be collected, Caleb's men surrounded the grounds. Dominic and Nora escaped through a tunnel beneath an old mausoleum, but Gideon was cut off behind them. Minutes later, Dominic received a video showing Sienna alive beneath the chapel. A countdown appeared across the screen. Fewer than 24 hours remained before the wedding. With fewer than 24 hours remaining, Nora returned to the wedding preparations as though Caleb's secret remained undiscovered. The luxury bridal hotel overlooked the same cliffs where the ceremony would take place. Crime leaders, business partners, and corrupt officials arrived from several states, each believing they were attending a marriage that would strengthen Dominic Voss's empire. In reality, Caleb intended to destroy it. Nora was locked inside a bridal suite under constant surveillance. Stylists dressed her in a custom white gown while armed guards controlled the hallway. As the final adjustments were made, Nora felt something rigid beneath the inner lining. Her years as a seamstress saved her. Hidden beside the waist seam was a tracking device. Near the shoulder, a spring-loaded needle had been stitched into the fabric, positioned to inject a sedative once pressure activated it. Caleb did not trust the bride to remain conscious long enough to resist. Nora carefully removed both devices without disturbing the gown. Instead of destroying the tracker, She transferred it into a decorative garment bag scheduled to leave through the service elevator. For several minutes, Caleb's security system would follow the wrong target. Nora used that opening to reach the rooftop garden, where Gideon emerged from behind a glass conservatory wall. He had survived the cemetery attack. More importantly, he had recovered another section of the former bride's damaged video. The recording showed Caleb meeting secretly with several of Dominic's guards. Men assigned to protect the ceremony had already joined the conspiracy. Gideon also confirmed that Sienna was being moved through the chapel's underground tunnel. Dominic could not rescue her without exposing their plan and causing Caleb to kill her immediately. Nora understood what remained. She had to walk toward the altar, not because the contract controlled her, because her sister's life depended on Caleb believing that it did. The ceremony began inside the private chapel above the ocean. Armed guards sealed the doors while Dominic waited beneath the stone archway, outwardly calm despite knowing Nora was entering a trap designed to destroy them both. Caleb activated the Hale account transfer remotely. The system rejected the request. Sienna's biometric confirmation was still missing. Beneath the chapel, Caleb's men dragged the captive twin into position. A section of the altar floor had been constructed from reinforced glass. Through it, Nora saw Sienna below. Her sister appeared weak, restrained, and terrified. For the first time since the switch, the twins looked directly at each other. Nora saw something worse than fear in Sienna's expression. She saw betrayal. Sienna believed Nora had abandoned her. Both sisters had sacrificed themselves, yet each believed the other had suffered because of her choice. Dominic began activating his counterattack through a device hidden inside his wedding ring. Before Gideon's loyal guards could respond, Caleb triggered the explosives beneath the chapel. The first blast shattered the altar and separated Dominic from Nora. Guests rushed toward locked exits while altered evidence appeared across the chapel screens, accusing Dominic of murdering his former fiancée. Several crime leaders raised their weapons toward him. The damaged floor collapsed beneath Nora. She fell through the altar and landed beside Sienna just as steel doors sealed the tunnel and seawater began pouring in. Seawater climbed around Nora's knees as she crawled toward Sienna. A jagged piece of metal had torn free from the damaged wedding gown. Nora used it to cut through the restraints around her sister's wrists while the tunnel continued filling. Their reunion lasted only seconds. Sienna revealed that Caleb had known about the identity switch before Nora ever reached the Voss mansion. He had allowed the deception to continue because bringing both twins inside Dominic's control made the hidden account easier to access. Caleb had already forced Sienna to provide biometric confirmation. He still needed Nora's signature. Above them, the chapel had become a battlefield. Several guards Dominic had trusted turned their weapons against him, while Gideon led the remaining loyal men through the burning reception hall. Flames spread from damaged electrical panels as terrified guests searched for exits. Below, Nora and Sienna fought the rising water. As children, they had learned to swim in the harbor near their father's shipping yard. That memory now became their only advantage. The sisters moved through the flooded passage, following the current toward a narrow opening beneath the cliffs. They surfaced inside a hidden coastal cave connected to the chapel tunnels. Caleb was waiting. He held the final transfer documents while armed men blocked the cave exit. Sienna's life became the pressure he used against Nora. Nora appeared to surrender. She signed the document using Sienna's name. Caleb believed the transfer was complete. Instead, the false signature activated a silent safeguard Owen Hale had built into the shipping system years earlier. He had anticipated that his daughters might one day be forced into unlocking the account. The offshore funds immediately froze. Copies of the financial records, murder evidence, and hidden transfers were sent to independent investigators. Nora's deception had begun as an act of fear. Now it became the weapon that destroyed Caleb's fortune. His control shattered. He turned toward Sienna, but Nora threw herself between them before he could fire. Dominic entered through a collapsing service tunnel and forced Caleb away from both sisters. The cave shook as burning debris fell from the chapel above. Caleb escaped through a lower passage and reached a waiting speedboat before Dominic could stop him. He left behind altered records designed to make Dominic appear responsible for the chapel explosion. By the time Nora and Sienna reached the shoreline, police vehicles, federal agents, and armed representatives from rival organizations had surrounded the coastline. Dominic's allies began abandoning him. Sienna believed revealing the twin switch publicly might protect Nora. Nora refused because the confession could make Sienna appear involved in the conspiracy. Dominic chose to carry the blame until Caleb was captured. Gideon traced Caleb's route toward the Hale shipping terminal, where the original financial server still contained evidence connecting him to every murder. Caleb intended to destroy it and escape aboard a cargo vessel. Dominic, Nora, and Sienna left the burning chapel through the coastal caves. At the shipping terminal, Caleb activated a cargo crane carrying enough explosives to destroy the evidence and everyone coming after him. Dominic, Nora, Sienna, and Gideon reached the Hale shipping terminal before Caleb could trigger the explosives. The entire yard had been transformed into a moving trap. Cargo containers shifted across suspended rails while armed men controlled the gates, loading platforms, and access roads. Beyond them, a freighter waited near the outer dock, prepared to carry Caleb out of the country once the Hale server was destroyed. Rival criminals arrived believing Dominic had ordered the chapel explosion. Before they could attack, Gideon connected the former bride's recovered video to the terminal's public display system. Her final recording appeared across every loading screen, exposing Caleb's involvement in her murder and proving that Owen Hale had been forced into the marriage agreement. Several of Dominic's former allies lowered their weapons. Caleb still controlled the explosives. Nora noticed something else. Workers had given both sisters identical terminal uniforms after their escape. From a distance, Caleb could no longer tell them apart. The same deception that had started the nightmare became their final advantage. Sienna carried a false account access device toward the freighter while pretending to be Nora. Caleb followed her, believing she held the only tool capable of restoring the frozen funds. Meanwhile, Nora entered the control tower to disable the crane holding the explosive container. Caleb realized the switch too late. He captured Sienna near the boarding ramp, just as one of his men released a suspended container above Nora's position. Dominic had seconds to choose. He could pursue Caleb or save Nora. He chose Nora. Dominic pulled her away before the container crushed the control platform, proving that she was no longer bait inside his plan. Caleb's attention shifted long enough for Sienna to escape his control. Gideon disabled the freighter's departure system, while Nora returned to the damaged controls. She reversed the crane and moved the explosive container away from the server building. Caleb activated the detonator manually. The explosion erupted above an empty section of the harbor, destroying the freighter's escape route without killing the terminal workers. Dominic confronted Caleb on the suspended boarding bridge. Below them stood the same captains and guards whose loyalty Caleb had manipulated for years. With the video still playing across the terminal, his betrayal could no longer be hidden behind Dominic's reputation. Caleb lost the Voss organization, the Hale accounts, and every ally who had believed him. Nora recovered the original marriage contract from his case. The document confirmed that Dominic had never requested the forced arrangement. Caleb had created it using authority left behind by Dominic's deceased father. Dominic captured Caleb instead of granting him the powerful death he expected. Gideon transferred the financial records, murder evidence, and kidnapping files to federal investigators. The remaining criminal leaders withdrew from the terminal. For the first time, Nora and Sienna stood beside each other without exchanging identities. The deception was over. But the legal consequences were not. The criminal contract could be destroyed, yet the marriage license signed during the ceremony remained active under Sienna's name. Nora had stood beside Dominic at the altar, but the state now legally recognized her twin sister as his wife. Caleb's arrest ended the immediate danger, but it did not erase the legal consequences of the wedding. Federal investigators charged him with kidnapping, financial fraud, murder, conspiracy, and the chapel attack. The recovered videos proved that he had manipulated the Voss organization and created the forced marriage agreement without Dominic's approval. Dominic avoided immediate prosecution, but Nora and Sienna faced a different problem. The marriage license carried Sienna's name, even though Nora had signed it and stood beside Dominic at the altar. Unless the truth was presented carefully, both sisters could be accused of fraud. Dominic used his legal influence to secure a sealed federal hearing. Inside the courthouse, Nora revealed the identity switch. She explained that she had taken Sienna's place because the marriage appeared to be a death sentence. Sienna confirmed that she had escaped willingly and had never consented to Caleb's arrangement. The original contract was declared invalid because it had been created through threats, coercion, and criminal authority. The marriage license was cancelled soon afterward. For the first time since Owen Hale's death, neither sister belonged to a debt, a contract, or a powerful man's plan. Dominic returned control of the Hale shipping shares to them. He also released evidence proving that Owen had been forced into the conspiracy while trying to protect his daughters. Nora refused the luxury payment Dominic offered. She accepted only enough support to reopen the bridal alteration shop and protect the workers Caleb had threatened. Sienna moved into the rebuilt Hale apartment and began creating a life that did not depend on Nora's constant sacrifice. That change forced Nora to confront a truth she had avoided for years. Protecting someone did not require disappearing inside their identity. Dominic removed the corrupt guards Caleb had recruited and placed Gideon in charge of an independent security division. More importantly, he did not pressure Nora to remain near him. Several months passed before she returned to the Voss estate voluntarily. She found Dominic inside the coastal garden overlooking the ocean. Their connection was no longer controlled by a contract, a false name, or a wedding designed to kill them. Dominic understood that Nora had challenged him more deeply than any rival. She had forced him to question the loyalty, authority, and traditions that once defined his world. Nora understood that he had protected her when doing so threatened his empire. Whatever existed between them would develop through choice rather than obligation. Later, Sienna visited the reopened bridal shop and found Nora designing a dress beneath a sign carrying her own name. The sisters no longer needed identical appearances to survive. The story appeared complete until Gideon arrived with one final piece of Owen's recovered archive. The file showed that Caleb had reported to an unidentified woman throughout the marriage conspiracy. A surveillance image placed her near Dominic's former fiancée shortly before the fatal crash. Dominic studied the blurred face and recognized her immediately. The deadly marriage had ended, but the woman who first ordered it was still living inside the Voss family.